is to expose you to careers that you may or may not have thought about. One of the careers we're going to talk about today is that of an artist. We have someone who has been working in the industry for quite a while. His name is Mr. Earl Jackson. Please welcome Earl to our show.
Hello.
Yes, welcome, Mr. Jackson. It's a pleasure to have you here. So thank you for taking the time to do that. We really appreciate it.
Thank you. You're welcome.
So before we get started, could you tell us a little bit about your background?
I am from the Ypsilanti, Ann Arbor area. Went to Willow Run High School, the same school that Mr. Banks went to, but I'm a little older. Went to Washtenaw Community College and Eastern Michigan, and I studied under John Lockhart, who was at the community college, Washtenaw Community College and University of Michigan.
Thank you for sharing that. And could you tell the viewers what exactly is an artist? For those people who might not know, might have an inkling, but don't have a clear picture.
My definition would be a person that expresses themselves through various forms. That could be the visual arts, which is what I am. I'm a painter, music, writer. I guess that's it, covering the arts. I express myself through painting the African American experience and the African diaspora. So I tell stories and I create, I guess you would say, take liberties with some fantasy as well.
What are the foundations you established that have contributed to your development as an artist?
Repeat that, please.
What are the foundations you have established that have contributed to your development as an artist?
Like I said, I studied under John Lockhart. I was a person that had talent, but I didn't have any direction. And so when I met John Lockhart and took classes from him, he gave me a lot of direction, discipline. I joined the National Conference of Artists. Went to various meetings and conferences, national and international. And so I learned from a lot of other people that express themselves differently. That organization had visual artists, musicians, teachers, curators, and directors of museums and galleries. So I got a broad understanding of what an artist is, what to draw, what information and ideas I could draw from, as well as just learning from myself. There was others that I gained through their experiences.
Mm-hmm. You mentioned John Lockhart. Could you tell the audience who exactly he was or is?
John passed away several years ago. He originally was from Detroit, and he was a portrait artist and a muralist. And he has murals at the University of Michigan, Wayne State, and I think he has some in Ohio too, those I know of. And he would always do portraits. You could, back in the 70s and 80s, and I think even the early 90s, you could see him at the Ann Arbor Art Festival. And he was always doing portraits on site right there. And he would also come here to Atlanta and do the Black Arts Festival. And so he was also on the committee as one of the lead artists that picked the sculptor to do the King Memorial statue in Washington, D.C.
You know, I want to ask you a little bit more about him, but I think before I do that, for those people who are wondering how to become an artist, do you have any ideas you can share with them about how does a person become an artist?
Yes. You can always take classes like I did. I took classes from John and from Eastern. And whether you want to go the route to get a degree, that's one avenue. There are art communities, associations around the country. If you want it to just be a hobby and it's something that you enjoy, you can go that route. And there are a lot of self-taught artists as well, and that are very good and very accomplished. So there's different ways of approaching it. But most people go through the academy. They go through school and receive degrees, and then they teach or find ways. And there's several ways you can make a living through festivals, galleries, and once you become really established, like some of the bigger, well-known artists, through galleries and museums.
Mm-hmm. Um, you brought up something I actually was going to ask you a little bit later, but since you broached that question, I will ask it. I actually read that you decided to take a different path and getting in it than rather than getting an educational degree. Um, could you tell us a little bit more about that?
Yeah, I was studying, and I was in and out of school because I was married and trying to raise a family at the same time, which is very difficult, no matter what degree you're trying to obtain. And so I was in and out of school. And the last time I went back was at Eastern Michigan, and I was working on my fine arts degree. And I dropped out again because Michigan was going through a very severe recession. To me, it was a depression. And I wound up at Borders Bookstore as their picture framer. And I worked there for 11 years as their picture framer, but I still worked on my art. And I was making plans to go back to school to finish my degree. And I went on a trip to Senegal, West Africa, with the National Conference of Artists. And once I returned, I did an image. To make a long story short, I did a painting called Following the Path of African American women dressed in African garb, carrying parasols. And that was just to give me a little extra money to start, hopefully, a retirement or help pay for school. And that painting took off, those prints took off. And I thought, I've made it. Why go back to school? But that was a mistake. I should have gone back anyway and finished. But it took off, and I was going to go back again. And then my counselor from Eastern, I forget his name. If I had gone back, he would have been my counselor. And we ran an exhibit at the Ypsilanti Library. And I was talking to him, and he told me, he said, what would I be doing if I got my degree that I'm not already doing as an artist? So that was a span of that was close to a 20-year period from graduating from high school up until that time. That was a 20-year period experimenting with trying to be an artist, going through the ups and downs of learning about the craft, the career, and so forth. It's a very difficult road. I would advise anybody, if they want to go that route, to make sure you can take care of yourself. I don't believe in that starving artist business. That's Hollywood. That is strictly Hollywood. Most people have a job on the side. And so if you're going to work, get a degree where you can make sure you can take care of yourself while you do your art until it takes off.
Wise advice. I actually wanted to ask you about your painting, Following the Path. A lot of your paintings are in black and white. Why did you choose this particular painting to go with the pastels?
That was an oil. That was my first color print, and it was in oil, and it was very soft in color. It looked, there were pastel colors. I didn't add any. Traditionally, African clothing has a lot of geometric shapes, designs, and patterns to it. But I wasn't using any photographs, graphs, or models for references. This was strictly out of my head. And so, to be honest, I was very intimidated by working on a blank canvas with no photos, no model, no reference, just out of my head. And because I said, if you're going to print work, if you're going to take an original and print it and be creative, it has to be your work. It can't be someone else's work. You get in trouble legally. And then it's not your work if you're just copying somebody else's. So that was strictly my idea out of my head. And I was very intimidated by a blank canvas. And so, but it worked out.
Yeah, it did.
Thank
Yes,
you.
yes, it did. I did want to ask you, because you mentioned something about plagiarizing work. And so, since you're an artist
Mm-hmm.
and AI has been all of the rage, and if you understand AI and how it takes from very things all over the internet, paintings, writings, whatever, um, what impact do you think AI has and will have on the art industry?
I don't know. I'm very old school, so um, that's a very good question. There was something on the TV the other day. I didn't pay too much attention to it about, I think, AI and literature, and I think it covered the arts period. But I don't. I think it will cause some problems because human nature, human beings will break the rules. To be more bluntly, humans will steal. They will steal other people's ideas and pawn them off as their own, which was done a lot back during the 90s, during the big boom where a lot of Black artists was making a living off their art because the African American community was it was a perfect storm. We had artists, galleries, frame shops, and works that was selling Afrocentric African American imagery and so forth and so on. And there was a lot of corner cutting back then. And so with AI, it's probably going to be even more.
Well, I guess before I move on to my next question, I'd like to ask you this question. Recently, there was a photographer who won I forget the name of the prize, but he won. He came in first and he won this huge prize, but he wouldn't accept it because he admitted that the photograph that he used was a product of AI.
Oh, wow. See, it's going to happen. Trust me, it's going to happen. Because I had someone that stole my work, and I was fortunate enough. When I first started out, you've probably seen this on a print. An artist will do something, a print, and they'll sign it, and then they'll put a C in a circle, and they think that protects them. And I was one of those people. And my lawyer, who grew up in the same neighborhood Mr. Banks and I came from, she told me one day, she said, that's not going to get it. You gotta file a copyright registration with the Library of Congress. And so I had all my work that I printed registered. And following the path was being stolen. And long story short, I won the case because I had it registered. When the judge saw my documentation, he told the defendant that he needed to settle. And so it's important. That's the other side of being an artist, learning the business end, the legal end as well. Because if you're going to take someone else's image and then you paint it, you can paint it just for pure pleasure, for self indulgence to have around your home for your own private enjoyment. But if you were to print that and then disseminate that throughout the country, you're asking for a lawsuit. And that happened a few times back that I know of back in the 90s.
Well, I appreciate you like giving that information to the viewers. I have another question that I'm curious about. A lot of your work centers on the life of African American musicians. I was just curious why you've chosen that particular perspective out of all the perspectives that are out there. Not dismissing the African American perspective, but you focus specifically on musicians, not for all your work, but why that voice?
I love music. Music is an extension. Morris Lawrence, who I don't know if you're familiar with Morris Lawrence, he was the director over the jazz program at the community college. He passed away back in the early 90s, I think it was. And Morris' philosophy was all the art should be under one building because it's a continuation. Um, they feed off of each other, and they help to support, and pretty much the same process, same way of creating. I love music, and really jazz music, which is what called classical African American or classical American, the original art form in America. And a lot of artists that do figurative work will draw from jazz. And I'll have it on while I'm painting, and you get a lot of rhythm and motion and movement in it. And so as a matter of fact, I finished a big piece, 3 years ago, that I have upstairs, uh, framed, and another music piece. I just love doing musicians.
All right. Well, I mean, that's not unlike many of the great writers. You look at Sonny's Blues, you look at a lot of the writers from the Harlem Renaissance, and what you get is the same thing that you were just talking about. So
Yeah.
I understand. I just want you to share it with, the audience so they can see your motivations.
Thank you.
No problem. I read a quote stating that you combine your creative concerns but retain elements that characterize your work at one stage of your career and incorporate them into a new context at another stage. My question to you is, do you still have creative concerns? And if so, what are they and how are they incorporated into your current work?
I'm in the process. I'm finishing up a commission, but once that's done, I'm in the process of doing something. I'm trying to move in a totally different direction, and instead of painting in the more Western style, I'm trying to move more closer, I guess, toward um, Aaron Douglas, um, John Biggers. I guess maybe trying to incorporate some of the techniques and angles of African sculpture. So it's growing pains, actually, what it is. It's growing pains and three-dimensional. So it's a series that came to me 40 years ago, and I'm just starting a couple of years ago to start working on it because I'm 70. I'll be 75 in a few months. So my window is closing. If I don't get started now, it won't get done.
Man, you look 24. Quit
Thank
that
you.
stuff. Quit that stuff.
Thank
That
you.
24-year-old saying I don't have much time. Man, please.
When I'm in Michigan again, I take you out for dinner.
You're a funny man.
But this series, I'm doing a lot of rereading African history and philosophy. The Dogon from Mali, their religious and spiritual philosophy. I'm reading that. In other books, I've come across authors talk about the Dogon, and the ancient African spirituality of Nubia, and of course Kemet, Egypt, and also my brother-in-law, who's Kenyan. My older sister married a Kenyan, and he has had a lot of influence before his stroke. He had a lot of influence on educating me about African, East African traditions and so forth. So that plays into the role of creating a body of work and going beyond just, and this was a philosophy John taught me, going just beyond the beauty, educating through painting.
You know, as you speak, I write, so I'm just letting you know that.
Okay, same process.
Yeah, and I was just thinking, I wish I don't have, I haven't drawn or painted in a while because my focus is writing, and I'm really trying to get back into it. But as you were speaking, I was just like, it would be great to see like a painting series, something called like Ankles and Feet, where you would just show the feet of African Americans in different stages of like dance, like it being lifted up and down with, because in Africa they have the ankle things, but
Right.
just have it evolve over like a series where it evolves to present day. Because if you were to do that, you would start with the African feet and the charms and the things that they held on their feet, and then you would move on to slavery, which would be chains, and then you would move on to, so feel free to take that, go with it if you'd like. Just saying. But I just think without necessarily showing the whole body,
Right.
and
Right.
having it be a metaphor for the journey of African Americans, and then like incorporate that jazz part, because they had the zoot suits and they had the shiny shoes and stuff like that, and then bring it all the way to the Nikes. Oh man, that would just take that, man. If you just take it.
Okay. Well,
because I think that that would be something that you could pull people in with, because they would see, oh, and then like you set them right next to each other for the evolution of it.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Oh man, I
Yeah.
was just thinking.
Yeah. Yeah.
Thank you.
But I did something back in the 80s. I did one painting like that, and I instead of calling it feet or something, I called it foots.
Oh really? No, ankles and feet, because what it would cover is the ankles, the jewelry from the ankles, and
Right.
then the feet,
Right.
and how that evolves, because eventually the ankle part disappears in some of the dress shoes, but then it comes back in the gym shoes.
Yeah. Yeah.
See?
Yeah.
And so there's an evolution of that ankle jewelry into the material. Oh man, you woo! Woo, I mean, I don't know if you're gonna do something, but man, I would go in. If you paint that, I'll be first in line.
Okay.
Be like, dang, let me know.
We'll next time I come home, we'll have to get together and kick that ideal around.
Absolutely, because then you could, like, if you do it in the African part, you can actually put parts of like the countries where they're at, like,
right, exactly.
Like you can do the boat, and then you could show the feet and the ankles on the slats. Oh man, don't get me started. I will give you the vision. And I know you're 25, and I know you don't think you have much longer to go, but do it while you can.
That is my only fear, that I don't get these body of works done, before my time is up. That's my only fear now.
Then you know what? Then do what you can now.
Right.
Don't
exactly.
talk about what you can't do and what you won't
right.
be able to do.
It's
do what you can now.
Right.
Okay, let me ask these questions, because I'm about to,
Okay.
You've been answering them, and I'm like, man, I was gonna ask him that. So
I'll share something with you that I heard from a writer one day. Years ago, I used to have, when I was trying to work out of my head, and I'll go into that story later, how that came about. But I would have a block, a painter's or drawer's block. Mm-hmm. I would sit there with my sketch pad trying to come up with an idea. But one day at work, when I was working at Borders, I had the radio on, and I heard this writing professor said, she told their students, just start writing. Just put anything down that comes to your mind. And I thought, that's what I need to start doing. When that pad is in front of me, just start doodling. Just put something down. It frees up the mind. It gets the juices flowing, and something comes up eventually.
Well, you know what I used to do when I had writer's block? I would just sit down and I'd say, I'm going to create something. Even if it's just a sentence, I would create something. And in doing that frequently, it freed up, it broke down the block. Actually, what it
Yeah.
did is it didn't break down the block. What it did, all those blocks got together and helped me create various things.
Mm-hmm.
Short stories, plays, um, novels, you name it. I sat down and I just created it. And, you know, writer's block shouldn't be a hindrance. It should be a way for you to find a new way to express your creativity.
Exactly.
So,
Yeah, I
okay,
agree.
let
Exactly.
me ask you. It is a pleasure talking to you. Let me tell you, you
Same,
don't even know what you have done for me today.
same here.
So, with your 25-year-old self. Anyways,
Oh, let's get
um,
all right.
hey, you know what? That's just the latest look. They're dyeing their hair gray and purple and whatever. So I'm like, dang, you ahead of the trend. Anyway, okay. Is there a painting that you feel best represents you as an artist?
I would say following the path and Summer Serenade at that particular time. I do have one that I never printed. It's oversized. It's 36 by 66, and it's called Magical Mystical Journey. And it's of some boys walking, boys from 5-year-old up until 16, 17, 18. And they're walking from one dimension. Uh, the young boys are riding on turtles, these huge tortoises, and some are playing instruments, African instruments, and one's on a zebra, and one's carrying a bird, and they're walking into a new dimension. And when I was painting it, Bev Willis, I don't know if you know Bev Willis. She's at she's in Ann Arbor. Bev graduated from Michigan graphic design, and she's with um, African American Museum of History. And she came over. She was my graphic artist also. That's how she fits in. And she came over. I didn't have a title for this piece, and it was on the floor because it was a poured, real liquid pouring technique. The background. And when she saw me painting the figures in, she gave me the title. She said, "Oh, that's magical. That's Magical Mystical Journey." And I thought, oh, and see, there goes, see that how that words, poetry, language fits in. I draw off of. I got another idea from a friend of mine. She's no longer with us. She came over to the house one day. She and another friend, and she was talking to her other girlfriend, and she said, "Girlfriend, excuse me, I shade all the ground I cover." My mind, I started thinking of imagery. So it comes from all music, spoken word, reading, you name it, sound.
Oh, oh, I know. Because as you were talking, I was thinking of a whole bunch of
See?
ideas, but we will get into that later. I
Oh,
have one more question to ask you. What words would you give in response to those pursuing a career as an artist?
patience, even though we're in this high speed technical age where young people coming up now, everything is, well, I don't want to overgeneralize, but it seems to me that things move so fast and results are expected immediately. Patience, even have all this speed and can reach on the other side of the globe through the internet and so forth, all these platforms. Patience, learn to develop your skill, your talent, and just be patient with it and learn from others. Exchange ideas and thoughts and being critiqued by, and definitely learn the business legal side because people rip you off. Just like any
Oh,
profession, they rip you off.
yeah. Well, You know, I want to say that it's been a pleasure having you here. I have to say, I love that you have so much energy and vibrancy and just your presentation, and then your zeal, desire, and compassion for art. I'm just loving that. So thank you. And we appreciate the time that you have shared with us. It's
Thank
been a
you.
wonderful time.
I appreciate it. I hope I answered your questions.
You know you did.